it's unlikely that any campaign would be able to change 20-point lead essentially.
Fact that he was granted asylum in the UK after being convicted of a sexual offence. Is this a problem with the law or is this a problem with the implementation of the law?
Yeah, I think probably a mixture of both. And the fact is, we've got to separate out where his different claims were. The first two claims he made were to the Home Office, and the third was to an immigration tribunal, which actually is separate to the Home Office and is kind of independent. And the reason that he should have failed essentially is because the Home Office rules suggest that anyone who is convicted of a crime which caused serious harm to another person shouldn't be allowed to claim asylum. And obviously, a conviction for a sexual offence, as he was for expedition exposure, should have prevented him. Now, we don't know essentially whether or the immigration tribunal doesn't have such hard and fast rules, and obviously it was that his conviction was placed kind of in the balance of different factors to do with his conversion to Christianity and the idea that he might be in danger from the Taliban if he were to return to Afghanistan. So yeah, there's going to be definitely a looking into how those things were done and whether actually the immigration tribunal system needs updating. If you can still basically have these cases where you fail through the Home Office, but then you pass the immigration tribunal. And yeah, there's definitely going to be a review into this, but also into kind of the wider issues around kind of the factors around an asylum claim and actually in terms of religion, how closely does someone do really believe them when they say they convert to Christianity? We know this is not the first person to claim asylum by virtue of changing their religion and then go on to commit an offence.
Let's talk about Northern Ireland because it's 2 years to the day since the Stormont Assembly collapsed. It's being restored today. Government is back in Northern Ireland for the people of Northern Ireland. I mean, this is hugely significant, not least politically, because for the first time, a nationalist, the leader of Sinn Féin, will be First Minister.
Yeah, and that's not the way the system was ever really set up for. There was never really an expectation that the nationalist parties would be in a position where they would have the most seats and they would get to choose the first minister. And that actually has been one of the key sticking points. But eventually, the fact is that this is as a result of free and fair democratic elections in Northern Ireland, which led to Sinn Féin getting to that position. And eventually the unionists had to acquiesce, although obviously it has taken a very, very long time. And we are going to see probably today the election of a speaker to Stormont and also that first minister, and the DUP will probably select someone to be deputy first minister. Yeah, it's kind of extraordinary. I don't think people really realize how bad things have got in Northern Ireland. Essentially, civil servants have been running Northern Ireland for the past couple of years and making big decisions on spending and other decisions that are just being put off or being put back to Westminster. People of Northern Ireland have not had representation in the way that they should have done. So yeah, it's a big moment to have it back, and it'll be remain to be seen, how we see it and whether actually it's going to lead to further calls for perhaps a border poll in Northern Ireland now that you've got a nationalist leader north of the border.
We'll talk about that more in detail in the next few minutes. Let's talk about analysis, which is in the Times today, looking at, well, what Rishi Sunak needs to do if he is going to win the next general election. It's being dubbed the biggest political comeback in more than 70 years. I mean, is this just a done deal now? There is no way that the Conservatives can come back. When you're looking at the polls, it's what it looks like.
Yeah, it would require such an enormous contraction of Labour's lead, and the fact is that it's been holding very steady. Like there have been big, massive leads that have come down in the run up to an election, but generally they've been starting to trend that way. You've been starting to see cracks appear. We're not seeing that with Labour's lead, and so it's frankly extraordinary. Remember when Keir Starmer took over in 2020, Labour was so far behind after that 2019 election. Everyone was sort of suggesting that Starmer had, it was a two-term job. There was no way they could turn it round in a single term. And now we're talking about Labour winning in a landslide and the Conservatives having, complete wipeout, sort of 97 style wipeout, but the other way around. So yeah, it's kind of extraordinary, really, and I suppose shows the way things have changed. And the campaign such as it is could lead to a change in those polling numbers. It could lead to a contraction in Labour, but it would require such a big change. It's unlikely that any campaign would be able to change 20-point lead essentially. And the problem also for the Conservatives is they don't need to just stop Labour getting a majority. They need to win a majority themselves if Rishi Sunak is to remain in power, because the way that the system works, there is no ability for him to have a coalition of any other party. So he needs to win an outright majority if he is to remain number